Right, we just want to get some of this detail that's actually on the kit sanded away so we can put our photo etch in. So this is simply, we just want to get this whole bit of detail that's going on our instrument panel here, just sanded away, sanded all nice and flat so we can put our photo etch down on it. So what I'm doing, I'm coming in with a metal sander, no particular reason, just to kind of get it sanded down like so. And plain and simply, we just need to keep hacking at this until it's all sanded away. So I've just basically sanded down that all nicely, and I'm just finishing off with a nice thin skinny stick. You probably noticed I quickly changed to the skinny sticks because the metal file weren't working too well, but there we go, there we go. It doesn't have to look pretty, it just needs to be able to give your photo etch something to bite down onto, nice flat surface. Right, so the next thing we need to do as well is we need to cut out our little dials here, which are a bit inaccurate because the dials are supposed to be black with white dials, but this is black dials and white background, so not exactly accurate, but it's still better than most, shall we say. So nice bit of scissors, and we don't, well actually we could probably just use our blade, to be honest. We don't need to go right up to the edges here. Right, okay, hold on, you can't see. Right, we don't need to go right to the edges or follow it perfectly. We just need it enough so as we've got all our dials still on here. Right, the edges aren't a big deal because they're just going to be covered up and you're not going to see them. You're not going to see how maybe unneat it is. Just get the dials in there. Right, like so. Cut that out, and there we go. Now what we need is our photo etch here, which will go, hold on, there we go. This photo etch then will go on top of here, and all our dials, hopefully as you can see, will be seen through. But we need to spray this up first before we do that. This is one little process we need to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go off camera and spray this black. Right, so I've just gone off and I've sprayed our photo etch off camera, just nice and black, and our instrument panel on our kit part nice and black on a cocktail stick. So let's just get on what we need to get on. We need some micro crystal clear or something to along those lines, right? And with a cocktail stick, right, we just dip in, right, and we can just nicely onto our bit of paper cut out dials here, which I've seen better, to be honest. We can just smear on a nice bit on here, just a nice little smear. Right, although I'm getting stuck to the table, and then we can simply then glue this into position on our photo etch. Although actually I'm probably getting ahead of myself, I probably should have cut the photo etch off first, but still, let's carry on. Right, and what we want to do now, that is all, ooh, hold on, almost in position. Get in there, get in there. Like so. So what you're going to see now in here is, here's our photo etch. Just bring it out a bit. And we've got our dials in there. It's looking a little white in there because of our micro crystal clear is gluing it in position. But when the micro crystal clear dries, it will go nice and crystal clear, it will look like glass, and you'll then be able to see those black dials showing through, giving us a nice bit of detail. And then really it is a simple case of cutting it off like I showed you on our little blackboard and our nice little holding template here, and then we can glue it onto our instrument display panel that we've sanded down all nice and flat. Right, as you can see, this has been a really rapid video build, because the whole point of rapid video build is that I leave out all the basic stuff, and simply this has just slotted together absolutely perfectly. There's been no need for me to kind of put the camera on and go, here we got a little fit issue here or something like that. It is just slotted together lovely. And the whole cockpit, where we got all that resin, sorry, not resin, where we've got the photo etch, looks really nice, weathered up and all that kind of stuff, and I'm really liking how that is going on inside there. We're going to have an open canopy as well, so we can show all that off. But really, this whole build, I mean, apart from just sanding down our seam lines, which because they've slotted together so perfectly, you're only going to need to come along with something like a fine sponge sanding stick, so no big issues there. And then it's just sealing the canopy, so not much videoing going on with the build stage, which I suppose in a way, because this is going to be an Alclads 2 focus where we're going to look at natural metal finishes, it does give us more time to kind of really focus on that area, so kind of a good point. But I've already showed you photo etch a bit on this video, so I want to show you a bit of resin. Now, if you've never used resin before, quick kind of rundown. Resin is basically a way of moulding detail in a way that you can get a lot more detail than you can with your standard styrene plastic. So you can really have some really cool, gorgeous looking parts, like this wheel for example. We've got all this real nice tread going on the wheel, and that is going to look really, really fancy and really nice. However, a bit of a downside, and that is resin can leave behind an oily substance on the surface of our resin. No big problem really, because I mean all you have to do is just go off soapy water, washing up liquid and water, and simply give your resin a bit of a wash. Now be careful with it, because some resin parts, I mean, you know, have sticky outy bits that can potentially break off, so just rub it down lightly, maybe with a toothbrush in the washing up liquid and water, and then leave to dry thoroughly before actually coming along and spraying. You could use thinners and wipe it down with thinners if you want, but the whole point is to get rid of that oily substance on the surface, because when you come along and do some spraying, what will happen is the oily surface will separate the paint, and it just makes it look oily and horrible, and you won't be able to get a full even coverage going down. So that's one thing to do. The next thing as well with resin is it is dangerous stuff, right? When you sand this down to the fine consistency of like sanding down with sanding dust, and you breathe that in, it is going to harm you. It is dangerous. You don't want to be breathing it in, so you need to get those face masks on, extractor fans on, doors open. I mean, if you can, do it outside. When you're finished, you know, to come in and simply pick up all your pieces, but then hoover down your work surface or something like that, because you could sand it down and the resin dust could settle somewhere, and you know, later on you could actually kind of disturb that resin dust that's settled down somewhere and breathe it in still again. So it is good to take all precautions when using resin. So getting these off of their bases, because they come in these big blocks, as you can probably see, they come on like big blocks, and you've got to cut them off, hopefully, as you can see. Now these propellers are pretty easy really. I mean, we could probably come along and use standard, well, we can't quite get in there. Let's try something else. Where's my blade gone? Now these nice little simple propellers, we could probably just cut into this, because resin is quite soft as well, as you can probably see here, nice and soft, and we can just cut into them quite easily. But those propellers were pretty easy, so no worries there. A little bit of a trim up with the flash and they're all good to go. Our wheels, on the other hand, that's going to take a bit more doing. Now we've got things that we can use like saws, as hopefully you can see here. We've got this www.cmkkits.com. This is a nice one. It's a micro saw. They look like blades on the end here, but them like micro kind of, well, as the name says, it's a micro saw. It's a saw that the blades are micro, and that's good for sawing it. And Trumpeter does one, wherever that's gone. Yep, Trumpeter's got this one. Now I like this one. It's good to have a different couple of types, because whereas with this saw you can only saw down as far as, hopefully as you can see, you only can saw down as far as where this piece of plastic is here, right, just there, that black piece of plastic. Whereas the Trumpeter saw, you can actually saw all the way down, if you get me. If you can see what I'm kind of getting at there. So it's kind of good to have a selection. Then you've got a big saw for, like, you know, your big resin cockpits and stuff. But for this one, I think what we'd need to do is we can just simply use this one. Right, so I'm just gonna come in and I'm just simply gonna saw it away. Right, trying to get you on camera. Right, and we just simply saw in. It's not a hard task, hopefully, as you can see. And we could probably turn that over and then probably saw this end, like so. And then in some cases, there you go, it just can pop off. You know, you've got a little bit left there that needed to be sawed, but you can just pop it sometimes, real easy. So hopefully, as you can see, this is off. And we've got a bit of resin dust going on here. It's not as thin as sanding, but you still want to be careful with it. So what we can do here is we can get ourselves a nice kind of medium sanding grit sanding stick, and simply instead of actually getting the sander and kind of going like that, where we use the sanding stick, moving the sanding stick, we can actually move the part itself and just sand it on this nice flat surface like so. Maybe do some circles both anti-clockwise and clockwise, and just get it all nice and flat on the underside. Okay, maybe a bit that way. Just want to get it all nice and sanded off, nice and neat. Alright, and that should do it. Right, now as you can probably see that this sanding dust here, this resin dust, is really fine. This is the stuff that, you know, if this kind of gets up in the air and you breathe it in, this is going to be the nasty stuff, right? So what I want to do now is I want to kind of like hoover up and clean up all this sanding stuff, actually get my face mask on, to be honest, and start kind of like chopping up all these little bits, which actually there is another way of kind of getting these resin bits off, which this is probably the most safest way, because there is no dust involved. What we do is we get our pea cutter and we simply cut along the line that we want removed, like so, until we break through. This is a little bit deep, and again you could probably give it a bit of a bend, although that's still got a bit to go. But hopefully, as you can see, you know, it's not dust that you're bringing up here, it's just long bits of resin, which, you know, you're not exactly going to breathe them in. So this is a bit more of a safer way, but still, you know, I mean, resin, just put those face masks on, get used to them, and there we go. We then just simply trim up this bit of resin that's left over, just to neaten it up, which I find a blade scraping it across the bottom is just as good as any sander. and that tidies that up real nice, hopefully like so. Check that out. And plain and simply, when it comes to the time of putting this on the model, alright, we can simply stick it in there like so. Oh, there we go, stick it in there like so, and that'll look a lot nicer than what the kit parts give. Now, one other thing with resin as well is you need to use super glue to actually super glue it in place. This isn't a case of being able to use something like Mr. Cement by Mr. Hobby, where it kind of melts the two pieces of plastic together and gives you a nice kind of join. You know, you're gonna have to use super glue, which is a little bit more, I don't like to glue stuff with super glue, because I mean, you don't get that nice kind of two pieces of plastic melting together and kind of, you know, in some ways getting rid of gaps at the same time, which is what the Mr. Cement and the Tamiya extra thin cement does. So another little tip as well I kind of forgot to mention was you can get something like one of these red pens here, and sort of go round to all your resin parts and just mark a line where it is they need to be cut. Okay, like so. Yeah, and it's just a quick indication, because I mean the last thing you want to do is cut into resin that you don't want to be cutting into. Most notably is stuff like resin cockpits. You know, if you can kind of write that up first with the red line, with the red pen, just to show where you want to cut it, it just kind of gets it all planned ahead where you're going to cut, and you can just carry on, cut it, and not make any mistakes. So I'm going to get cracking on with all this resin and get my face mask on and everything, and then I'll kind of get back to you with the next kind of part of this rapid video build. Found ourselves a little bit of a problem with the kit, and I just want to show you how to tackle it. And the problem is, let's bring you right in. Right, is just in this like little air intake thing or whatever it is going on here, we've got this little seam line that just runs right down, right? Because this has been, the fuselage has been two pieces coming together. We can sand all this quite nicely on top and going all the way down and along here, but this has got like a nice kind of like, it's sort of in there in an air intake kind of area, and for us to kind of get in there we would have to well, fill inside there, sand it down, but to actually get a sanding stick actually in here to sand at it and everything is going to be rather tricky. So what we could do is make ourselves a bit of plastic card, right? What we do, we get a bit of plastic card and we simply cut our plastic card to the right size, like I've already done, alright, and then we can just nicely slot that in there instead of trying to fill and sand. So we're basically using a plastic card piece to fill and sand it. So plain and simply now we get ourselves some glue. I'm using the Mr. Cement by Mr. Hobby. You can use the Tamiya extra thin cement if you want, and plain and simply we glue this into place to get rid of a nasty little seam line that's in there. Alright, like so. So what we need to do now is simply let that dry, and then we can look at like just sanding back this little bit of a lip that's pulled, that's just come out because of the plastic card, and then boom, that should all look nice. A plastic card now has had a good time to nicely dry, and we just want to trim up, let's bring you in, alright, we just want to trim up this bit of plastic card and make it nice and flat. So we can simply come in with a blade to start with, right, just to get rid of the bigger chunks, like so. Hopefully, as you can see, and then what we could do is we can just come in with let's find a sanding stick we could use. Could probably use a nice bit of a medium sanding grit here, just to level this off. And there is a bit to sand away, so I mean, you know, coming in with a nice medium just to speed things up a bit. just like so. I mean, looking at this, we may have to come along with a bit of filler, but we might get away with it. Let's try a bit of a wet sand as well, so a little pot of water on the side, and we can just start wet sanding it. Right, and we're just doing nice circles with a nice medium grit, and we're doing circles like so. And then we can get ourselves a fine sanding stick, if I can just quickly find one. Yeah, we've got a nice little fine sanding stick here. Again, nice bit of a wet sand, and we just sand at this nicely to start smoothing it off, right? Because our coarse sanding stick has probably just made a bit of damage to the plastic, so we want to kind of get all those scratches and everything out from the coarse sanding stick and make this all nice and smooth. Like, get in there, and then we can get ourselves a fine but a sponge fine sanding stick, and again a little bit of water just to make it a nice wet sand. And this should restore the plastic back to being nice and smooth after that medium grit sanding stick. Right, and then you want to, and because we're going to be doing a natural metal finish, it's really a good idea to make sure that everything that you do on your model is as perfect as you can. So, because I mean, really, natural metal finishes, it really shows up with those kind of paints. So I come along and go for an even finer sanding stick. Yeah. Sorry, a sponge sanding stick, to really make sure the plastic is real nice and smooth and we've got no scratches or any kind of micro scratches, because it's going to show up in our paint work, right? It's one of the keys to doing natural metal finishes, is to have a really nice perfect job, because any imperfections are going to show up. And we can just probably finish this off with, say, a buff and a polish. Alright, so we can just quickly bring these in. Alright, and you'll probably start to hear it squeak, and that means we are getting shiny. And we could turn over to our final polish, and this now will start to look shiny. The plastic will actually look shiny, which is going to be real nice and perfect for our natural metal finishes. So hopefully what you can see now is our little air intake here has now been made seamless by just putting in a bit of plastic card to cover up the seam line, and then we just sanded down and smoothed off this little bit that was poking out to make it look like the rest of the aircraft. But what we want to do is, when we come up to priming, we want to just maybe quickly spray a bit of paint on here and just making sure it all looks good, because let's face it, because we've got like bits of grey plastic, white styrene plastic, you can't exactly 100% tell how this is going to look until we actually get some paint down on it. As you can see, we're all nicely in the spray booth area now, so we're on to the spraying stage, which our focus for this rapid video build is going to be natural metal finishes. But before we start, what I like to do with canopies that I want to be open is to glue it into place, right? But glue it into place very, very lightly. And now we're going to do this. We're going to use some micro crystal clear, right? And what we're going to do, just going to get a little bit on the end of a cocktail stick, like so, and we're simply just going to do a few little dollops, right? Nothing major. Right, we're not gluing all the way around, and hopefully you've seen on camera that the white is where our glue is, and as you can see, I'm just putting one or two little dollops, right? We're not gluing all the way around. We don't want to glue this rock solid down in place. We just want it to just sit nice and light, right? Now we've had a little bit of the glue spurt out the sides, as you might be able to just see there. Nice and simple, moist cotton wool bud, and let's just wipe that away. Right, just check around. We've got another little dot just here. Right, and what this is going to do for us now is it's going to hold our canopy in place, right? So we haven't got to worry about it coming off or anything like that. It's just going to hold very delicately, very nicely in place just for spraying, right? And once we've all sprayed up, we should, and deckled and everything, we should be able to just simply come along and virtually almost just pop this off. It might need a little bit of force, but it should pop off quite easy for us to then have the open canopy.